The cargo hold of the starlit wanderer reeked of burnt ozone and desperation. Zara Thorne wiped grease from her hands as she surveyed the damage from their latest smuggling run. 3 plasma burns scarred the hull, and the hyperdrive was making that ominous clicking sound that usually preceded catastrophic failure. She needed credits, and she needed them fast. The calm system crackled to life, broadcasting the standard Imperial warning that had become as familiar as her morning coffee. All vessels in Sector 7, be advised, rebel activity detected. Any ship harboring fugitives will be destroyed without warning. Zara rolled her eyes and killed the transmission. The Terran Empire's paranoia had reached new heights since the Valdari Resistance began their uprising 6 months ago. Not that she cared much about politics. Her business was moving cargo from point A to point B. No questions asked. The fact that the galaxy was tearing itself apart only meant higher prices for her services. A soft chime indicated an incoming distress signal. Zara hesitated. Distress calls were either genuine emergencies or elaborate traps set by pirates. Given her current location in the lawless drift zone, the odds favored the latter. But something about this signal felt different, weaker, more desperate. She traced the source to a small debris field, remnants of what looked like a luxury yacht that had been torn apart by military-grade weapons. Floating among the wreckage was a single escape pod, its beacon flashing in a pattern she didn't recognize. Probably some rich merchant's kid, she muttered, but found herself adjusting course anyway. Maybe they'd pay well for rescue. The pod was barely intact, its hull breached in 3 places and life support failing. Through the cracked viewport, she could see a figure slumped unconscious inside. Zara docked carefully, extending her ship's atmospheric field to create a safe extraction zone. The moment she cracked the pod's seal, she knew she'd made a mistake. The figure inside wasn't human. Tall and lean with pale blue skin marked by intricate silver tattoos. He was unmistakably Valdari, one of the alien rebels the Empire was hunting. He was also dying. Blood seeped from multiple wounds, and his breathing was shallow and irregular. The smart thing would be to seal the pod back up and pretend she'd never found him. Harboring a Valdari rebel was a death sentence under Imperial law. Instead, she found herself dragging him aboard her ship. "You're an idiot, Zara," she told herself as she hauled the unconscious alien to her small medical bay. A complete and utter idiot. But as she began treating his wounds, she noticed details that made her pause. His clothes, though torn and bloodied, were made of expensive fabric. The silver tattoos weren't random decorations, but intricate genealogical marks that spoke of noble lineage. This wasn't just any rebel, this was someone important. Hours passed as she worked to stabilize him. His physiology was similar enough to human that her basic medical supplies were effective. Though she had to guess at dosages, twice his heart stopped, and twice she managed to restart it with her ship's medical equipment. As dawn broke over the nearest planet's surface, casting orange light through the viewports, her patient's eyes fluttered open. They were a startling shade of violet, with flecks of gold that seemed to catch and hold the light. Where he began, then stopped, his eyes focusing on her face. When he spoke again, it was an accented but fluent Terran standard. "You're human." "Guilty as charged," Zara replied, checking his vital signs on the scanner. "And you're Valdari, which makes us both idiots for being in the same room together." He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, his face contorting in pain. "My ship, scrap metal. You're lucky to be alive." She helped him lie back down. "I'm Zara Thorne, captain and sole crew of this rust bucket. And you are?" He hesitated, clearly debating how much to reveal. Kale Vex." The name meant nothing to her, but she caught the slight emphasis he placed on his surname. Among the Valdari, family names carried weight, indicating clan affiliations and social status. "Well, Kale Vex, you're healing faster than you should be, which is good because we need to get you somewhere safe. The Empire's got patrol ships crawling all over this sector." "Why?" The question was simple, but loaded with implications. Zara paused in her work, really looking at him for the first time. Despite his injuries, there was an intensity to his gaze that made her nervous. Not dangerous, exactly, but significant, like he was someone accustomed to being listened to. "Why what?" Why did I save you? He nodded. It was a fair question, and one she'd been asking herself. Honestly, I'm not sure. Maybe because someone once told me that how you treat your enemies says more about you than how you treat your friends. And am I your enemy? The way he asked it, quietly and without challenge, made something twist in her chest. I don't know what you are. They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the ship's engines filling the space between them. Then Kale spoke again, his voice softer. The ship that attacked us, it wasn't Imperial. Zara's head snapped up. What do you mean? The weapon signatures, the attack pattern. It was designed to look like an Imperial raid, but the technology was wrong. Someone wanted it to appear that the Empire destroyed a Valdari diplomatic vessel. Diplomatic vessel? Zara's eyes narrowed. You said you were rebels. Kel's smile was rueful. I said no such thing. You assumed. He struggled to sit up again, this time managing it with her help. My family was returning from secret peace negotiations with moderate Imperial factions. Someone on both sides, I suspect, wanted those talks to fail. The implications hit Zara like a punch to the gut. You're not just nobility, you're royalty. Third in line to the Valdari throne, he confirmed. Though given that my ship was destroyed and I'm presumed dead, that may no longer be relevant. Zara stood up quickly, pacing the small medical bay. This was worse than harboring a rebel. She was harboring an alien prince, whose death could trigger an interstellar war. This is insane, she muttered. I need to get you back to your people immediately. No. The quiet authority in his voice stopped her pacing. If I return now, claiming to have survived when all evidence suggests otherwise, it will only convince both sides that the peace talks were a trap. The war will escalate. So what are you suggesting? Kale met her eyes, and she saw something there that made her pulse quicken. Not just intelligence, but a kind of desperate hope. Help me find out who really destroyed my ship. Help me find proof that someone on both sides wants this war to continue. Give me time to heal, to think, to plan, and in return, I'll make sure you're well compensated for your trouble. And perhaps, he added, his voice dropping to something almost intimate, we might discover that the barriers between our peoples aren't as insurmountable as we've been told. Zara stared at him, aware that she was standing at a crossroads. On one path lay safety, anonymity, and the continuation of her simple smuggler's life. On the other lay danger, conspiracy, and the most beautiful man, alien or human she'd ever met, asking her to help him save two worlds. The smart choice was obvious. You realize this is probably going to get us both killed, she said finally. Kel's smile transformed his entire face, making him look younger and infinitely more dangerous. To her peace of mind, probably, but what's life without a little risk? Against every instinct for self-preservation she possessed, Zara found herself smiling back. Boring, she admitted, incredibly boring. As she helped him to the ship's small galley for something to eat, she tried to ignore the way her skin tingled where their hands touched, or how his eyes seemed to track her every movement. This was a business arrangement, she told herself. A very dangerous business arrangement with a very attractive client, nothing more. But as the Starlit Wanderer changed course for the Outer Rim territories where they could disappear while investigating the conspiracy, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a turn from which there would be no returning. And for the first time in years, she found herself looking forward to the unknown. The abandoned research station Erebus 7 drifted like a metallic ghost through the Kepler Nebula, its darkened corridors echoing with the whispers of forgotten experiments. Marcus Reed's boots clanged against the maintenance grating as he made his way deeper into the station's bowels, his portable scanner painting eerie shadows on the walls with its pale blue light. 3 weeks had passed since the mysterious broadcasts began disrupting hyperspace communications across 7 sectors. The Terran Engineering Corps had sent him to investigate what they assumed was equipment malfunction at the old research facility. What Marcus had found instead was evidence of something far more sinister. The station hadn't been abandoned, it had been evacuated in haste, leaving behind half-completed experiments and encrypted data cores that spoke of projects that officially didn't exist. Projects involving joint human Valdari technology. developed in secret during the brief peace talks that had ended in tragedy. Marcus paused at an intersection, checking his scanner for the energy signature that had been leading him deeper into the facility. The readings were getting stronger, which meant he was close to whatever was generating the interference. He just hoped it wasn't another automated defense system like the one that had nearly vaporized him to levels up. A soft sound made him freeze, footsteps, light and careful, coming from the corridor to his right. Marcus drew his plasma cutter, the tool's energy cell humming to life. Pirates and scavengers were common in abandoned facilities, and most weren't interested in sharing their finds. "I know you're there," he called out, his voice echoing in the empty corridor. "I'm armed, and I really don't want to hurt anyone today." Silence. Then, unexpectedly, a voice answered in accented standard. "Nor do I wish violence, human. Perhaps we might discuss this reasonably." The voice was distinctly feminine and definitely not human. The subtle harmonics and careful pronunciation marked it as Valdari. Marcus kept his weapon ready, but lowered it slightly. "Depends on what you're doing here," he replied. "The station is under Terran Engineering Corps' investigation." A figure stepped into the intersection, hands raised to show she was unarmed. Marcus's breath caught. She was Valdari, but unlike any he'd seen in the military briefings, where most Valdari had the typical pale blue skin. Hers was a deeper shade of azure that seemed to shimmer in his scanner's light. Her silver hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore the form-fitting bodysuit of a ship's crew, though the fabric looked more expensive than standard issue. What struck him most were her eyes, a brilliant amber that seemed to hold depths of intelligence and something else, sadness, perhaps, or loss. "I am Nix Solara," she said, stepping closer with careful movements, "and I believe we are here for the same reason." "Which is," she gestured toward the deeper sections of the station, "to understand why this facility was truly abandoned, and what it has to do with the communication disruptions that have been plaguing both our peoples." Marcus studied her carefully. "You're not military, nor are you, I think. Your equipment is civilian grade. Your movements lack military precision." Her amber eyes flicked to his plasma cutter, "And you hesitated to shoot an unarmed opponent." "I'm an engineer," he admitted, though he kept his weapon ready, "sent to investigate technical problems, as am I quantum communications specialist, formerly of the Valdari Science Consortium." Her expression darkened. "Until my research into temporal spatial anomalies was classified and my access revoked without explanation." Something in her tone made Marcus lower his weapon completely. "What kind of anomalies?" "The kind that could explain how someone has been manipulating hyperspace communications to intercept and alter diplomatic transmissions." She stepped closer, and Marcus caught a subtle scent like ozone and starflowers, the kind that could have been used to sabotage the peace talks that ended in Prince Kael Vex's supposed death. The name hit Marcus like a cold shock. "You think the prince is still alive?" "I think someone with access to highly advanced technology wanted both sides to believe he was dead." Nix's eyes met his. "Someone who had access to the station's research into quantum manipulation." Marcus felt the pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. The communication disruptions aren't random system failures. No, they're being generated by technology developed here, in this station, using joint human-Valdari research. She gestured toward the deeper sections. "I've been tracking the source for days. It's in the primary laboratory complex." "Why haven't you investigated already?" Nix's expression grew rueful. "Because the automated security systems don't recognize my biometric signature. They were programmed to allow access only to authorized human Valdari research teams." "Joint teams," Marcus repeated, understanding dawning. "You need a human partner, and you, I suspect, need someone who understands the theoretical framework behind the technology we're about to encounter." Marcus considered her proposal. Everything about this situation screamed danger, but the logical part of his mind was already intrigued by the implications of what she was suggesting. Joint human Valdari technology was the stuff of theoretical papers and wild speculation. The chance to see it in action was irresistible. "If I help you," he said carefully, "what guarantee do I have that you won't space me once we find what we're looking for?" Nick smiled. and the expression transformed her face completely. "The same guarantee I have that you won't do the same to me. We'll have to trust each other." "Trust," Marcus repeated. "Between a human and a Valdari, in the middle of what's essentially a war zone. Is there a better place to start?" Despite every rational thought telling him this was insane, Marcus found himself nodding. "All right, Dr. Solara, lead the way." The laboratory complex was a marvel of combined engineering, with human practicality merged seamlessly with Valdari aesthetic sensibility. The security scanner required both their biometric signatures to grant access, and Marcus couldn't help but notice how Nix's hand brushed against his as they worked together. To activate the systems, inside, they found equipment that shouldn't have existed: quantum manipulation arrays that could theoretically fold spacetime, communication relays that could intercept and alter transmissions across multiple dimensional frequencies, and at the center of it all, a massive holographic display showing hyperspace communication traffic across the entire galaxy. "This is impossible," Marcus breathed, moving toward the central console. "The power requirements alone would need a stellar-class energy source. Not impossible," Nix corrected, her fingers dancing across alien control interfaces. "Just extremely dangerous. Look at these readings." Marcus joined her at the console, very aware of her proximity as she pointed to energy signatures on the display. "These quantum fluctuations, they're not natural. Someone has been using this array to create artificial temporal spatial anomalies," Nix explained. "Pockets of distorted spacetime that can intercept and redirect hyperspace communications." Her voice grew grim, including the diplomatic channels used during the peace negotiations. "Meaning someone could have altered the messages between the negotiating parties," Marcus said. The implications hitting him made each side think the other was planning betrayal. "Exactly. And look at this." Nix activated another display, showing a timeline of the disruptions. "The pattern begins 3 months before Prince Kel's ship was destroyed and intensifies. Afterward, someone has been using this technology to ensure the war continues." Marcus studied the data, his engineer's mind racing through the possibilities. But who has access to this kind of technology and the motivation to keep the war going? Before Nix could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the complex. Red emergency lights bathed the laboratory in an ominous glow. As automated systems activated around them, unauthorized access detected. A synthetic voice announced, "Initiating security protocols." "Someone knows we're here," Marcus said, moving quickly to the nearest exit. But the blast doors were already sealing, trapping them in the laboratory. "It's not just someone," Nix said, her amber eyes wide with realization as she stared at the display. "Look at the access logs." Marcus followed her gaze to a stream of data flowing across the screen. User authentication codes, timestamps, authorization levels, and at the top of the list, a designation that made his blood run cold. "Terran Engineering Corps, Special Projects Division," he read aloud. "That's my department. And this," Nix pointed to another entry, "Valdari Science Consortium, Classified Research Division, my former supervisor's authorization code." The horrible truth settled over them both like a heavy blanket. This wasn't the work of some rogue faction or terrorist cell. This was a joint operation between elements of both governments, using their own citizens' research to maintain a profitable war. "We need to get this information out," Marcus said, moving to the communication array. "Broadcast it on all frequencies." "No," Nix caught his arm, her touch sending an unexpected jolt of warmth through him. "They'll kill us before we can transmit, and they'll destroy the evidence. Then what do you suggest?" Their eyes met across the console, and Marcus saw not just intelligence in her amber gaze, but a fierce determination that matched his own. "We take the research with us, all of it, and we find someone who can help us expose the truth. The entire database is encrypted and hardwired into the stations." The diplomatic quarter of New Geneva glittered with false promise. Beneath the amber glow of evening lights, Finn Cross adjusted his formal jacket for the 3rd time as he watched the elegant figures moving through the embassy's reception hall below. At 19, he was considered too young for serious diplomatic work, but old enough to be useful as his father's aide during the critical negotiations that everyone hoped would prevent all-out war. Ambassador Thomas Cross moved through the crowd with practiced ease, his silver hair and distinguished bearing marking him as exactly what he was, one of the Terran Empire's most skilled negotiators. Finn had grown up watching his father broker peace between warring factions, and tonight felt different, more desperate. The stakes had never been higher. The Valdari delegation should arrive within the hour. His father's aide, Rebecca Santos, murmured as she joined Finn at the observation balcony. Security's been tripled, but everyone's nervous after what happened to Prince Kel's ship. Finn nodded absently, his attention caught by movement in the gardens below. A figure in dark clothing moved with fluid grace between the sculpted hedges, too purposeful to be a casual wanderer. His diplomatic training kicked in. Always watch for what doesn't belong. Rebecca, he said quietly. Has security cleared the garden perimeter? She followed his gaze, then immediately activated her comm unit. Control, this is Santos. I need a sweep of the East Gardens, possible unauthorized personnel. But when they looked again, the figure had vanished. An hour later, Finn found himself in the garden himself, ostensibly checking the arrangements for tomorrow's outdoor ceremony, but actually following an instinct he couldn't name. The diplomatic reception was in full swing above, voices and laughter drifting down through the open windows. But here among the moonlit paths it was peaceful, too peaceful. The attack came without warning, a shadow detaching itself from behind, a marble statue, moving with lethal intent toward the embassy's main building. Finn reacted on pure instinct, throwing himself forward to intercept what he now realized was an assassin heading for his father. They collided in a tangle of limbs, rolling across the manicured grass. Finn had studied combat as part of his diplomatic training, but this was different, real, desperate, with actual lives at stake. His opponent was smaller than him, but moved with professional efficiency, each strike precise and economical. It was only when they grappled close that he realized two things. First, his opponent was female, and second, she was Valdari. Her hood had fallen back during their struggle, revealing angular features and the distinctive pale blue skin of her species. But it was her eyes that stopped him, a deep violet that held intelligence, determination, and something that looked almost like regret. Let me go, she said quietly, speaking perfect standard despite her obvious alien heritage. You cannot stop what must happen. I can't let you hurt my father, Finn replied, maintaining his grip despite the way her proximity was affecting his concentration. She was beautiful in an exotic way that made his pulse race, even under these circumstances. Your father, her violet eyes widened slightly. You are the ambassador's son, Finn Cross, and you're an assassin. A complex expression crossed her features. My name is Sira Nightwind, and yes, I suppose I am. They stared at each other in the moonlight, neither moving to continue the fight. Finn became acutely aware of how close they were, of the subtle scent of night-blooming flowers that seemed to cling to her skin, of the way her breathing had synchronized with his. Why? He asked finally. Why kill a man who's trying to prevent a war? Sira's laugh was bitter. Because there are those who profit from war, and they have made it clear that peace negotiators are expendable. Her voice dropped to a whisper, including the negotiators' families. The threat was implicit but clear. Finn felt ice form in his stomach. They have someone you care about, my younger brother, captured during a refugee evacuation 3 months ago. Her violet eyes glistened with unshed tears. They promise his safe return if I complete this assignment. Finn's mind raced. Everything about diplomatic protocol said he should call security, have her arrested, protect his father at all costs. But something about her pain resonated with him, and his diplomatic instinct suggested a different approach. What if there was another way? He said carefully. What if we could save your brother without you having to kill anyone? Impossible. The people holding him have resources beyond anything you can imagine. They've been manipulating both sides of this conflict for their own purposes. Then we need to find proof of that manipulation, Finn said, his mind already working through possibilities. My father has contacts throughout both governments. If we can expose the conspiracy, they will kill Jax the moment they suspect. I've betrayed them, Syrah interrupted. I cannot take that risk. Finn studied her face in the moonlight, seeing not just an assassin, but a sister desperate to save her brother. It was a feeling he understood completely. He would do anything to protect his father. Then we don't give them time to suspect, he said. We move fast, tonight. Syrah stared at him as if he'd grown a second head. You would help me, even knowing what I came here to do. You haven't done it yet, Finn pointed out. And if what you're saying is true, then my father is in danger regardless. These people won't stop with one failed assassination attempt. For a long moment, they remained frozen in their strange-to-blow human and Valdari, supposed enemies, caught between duty and an impossible attraction that neither could deny. This is insane, Syrah whispered, but Finn could hear the hope creeping into her voice. Completely, he agreed. But insanity seems to be the only rational response to an insane situation. They separated slowly, both of them aware that they had crossed some invisible line. Syrah rose gracefully to her feet, offering Finn a hand, up that he accepted despite knowing he probably shouldn't trust her. If we're going to do this, she said, I need to contact my handlers before they become suspicious. Make them think the assassination is proceeding on schedule. And I need to get access to my father's diplomatic files without alerting embassy security. Finn brushed grass from his formal jacket. How long do we have? The assassination is scheduled for tomorrow morning, during the outdoor ceremony. That gives us approximately 10 hours. Finn nodded, his mind already racing through the logistics. Meet me in the embassy's archive level in 1 hour. There's a service entrance through the underground garage that bypasses most of the security. Sensors. As Syrah melted back into the shadows, Finn stood alone in the garden, wondering if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Everything rational told him to alert security immediately. But something deeper, some instinct he didn't fully understand, told him to trust her. An hour later, he was beginning to question that instinct as he waited in the darkened archives. The embassy's historical records stretched back centuries, containing sensitive documents that could destabilize governments if they fell into the wrong hands. Bringing a known assassin here was possibly treason. A soft sound made him turn, and Syrah emerged from the shadows like a wraith. She had changed from her dark infiltration gear into civilian clothes that made her look younger, more vulnerable. But her violet eyes remained alert and dangerous. Any trouble getting in? Finn asked, quietly. Your security is adequate for deterring casual intruders, she replied, which he suspected was a polite way of saying it hadn't slowed her down at all. They worked in silence for the first hour, Finn accessing diplomatic files while Syrah used equipment from her pack to decrypt and analyze the data. Her technical skills were impressive. Whatever organization had trained her had done so thoroughly. Here, she said finally, highlighting a series of communication intercepts on her portable display. Coded transmissions between someone in your diplomatic corps and someone in our military command. The encryption is sophisticated, but the pattern suggests coordination. Finn leaned over her shoulder to study the data, very aware of her proximity, and the subtle scent of ozone and starflowers that seemed to surround her. Can you decode the actual messages? Given time, yes, but look at the timestamps. Her finger traced the chronology. These communications began 3 months ago, just after your father was assigned to lead the peace negotiations. The same time your brother was captured, Finn realized. No coincidence. Syrah's voice was tight with controlled anger. They've been planning this for months. The assassination, the continued war, all of it orchestrated by people on both sides, who benefit from the conflict. As they continued working, Finn found himself stealing glances at Syrah's profile. The concentration on her face, the graceful efficiency of her movements, the way she unconsciously tucked a strand of silver hair behind her ear when she was thinking, all of it combined to create a picture of someone remarkable. Why did you become an assassin? He asked during a quiet moment between file searches. Syrah's hands stilled on her equipment. Survival. After our parents died in the early fighting, Jax and I had nothing. No clan, no protection, no future. The Shadow Guild offered training, purpose, a way to eat regularly. She met his eyes. Not everyone has the luxury of choosing their path. And now, Now I'm questioning everything I thought I knew about honor and duty." Her violet gaze held high. The asteroid mining station Broken Dreams lived up to its name in every possible way. Jace Hunter wiped sweat from his forehead as he emerged from beneath the malfunctioning atmospheric processor, his mechanics coveralls stained with hydraulic fluid and frustration. 3 weeks had passed since the conspiracy exposures had rocked both the Terran Empire and Valdari Confederation, and the aftermath was proving as dangerous as the war itself. "Any luck with the recycling systems?" asked Tomas Rivera, the station manager. His weathered face creased with worry. "We're down to 12 hours of breathable air if you can't get it working." "The sabotage was professional," Jace replied, cleaning his hands on an oil-stained rag. "Whoever did this knew exactly which components to damage for maximum disruption, with minimal obvious signs." Broken Dreams was one of dozens of independent mining operations caught in the chaos following the peace revelations. With both major governments in upheaval, smaller facilities found themselves vulnerable to raids, equipment failures, and worse, abandonment. The station's population had dwindled from 300 to barely 50 hardy souls who had nowhere else to go. Jace was one of them. At 25, he had already worked on more space stations and cargo haulers than most mechanics saw in a lifetime. Born on a frontier colony that had been destroyed in the early fighting, he had learned early that survival meant being useful, being invisible, and never getting to attach to any one place. That philosophy was being tested by his current situation. Jace called Maria Santos from the communications center. "We've got an incoming ship requesting emergency docking. Drive failure and life support critical." Jace sighed, grabbing his emergency repair kit. "What's the ship configuration?" "Small merchant vessel, Starfire's Grace, Valdari Registry, but the pilot's transmitting in standard." In the weeks since the peace negotiations had resumed, mixed crews were becoming more common, though they still attracted suspicion from hardliners. On both sides, Jace made his way to the docking bay, wondering if this would be another group of refugees fleeing the political chaos. The ship that limped into the docking bay was indeed small, a sleek Valdari design that showed signs of hasty repairs and hard use. As the airlock cycled, Jace prepared for the usual mix of desperation and gratitude that characterized most emergency rivals. What he wasn't prepared for was the woman who stepped out of the ship. She was Valdari, with the typical pale blue skin and silver hair, but there was something different about her bearing. Where most Valdari moved with fluid grace, she carried herself with the confident swagger of someone accustomed to getting her way through charm and negotiation rather than force. Her clothes were practical spacer gear, but cut from expensive fabric and fitted perfectly to her athletic frame. "Are you the station mechanic?" she asked, her accent giving her standard a musical quality. "I'm Raven Starfall, captain and owner of this magnificent piece of engineering optimism." She gestured toward her ship with mock grandeur. "And right now, she's more optimism than engineering, despite the stress of the station's situation." Jace found himself smiling. "Jace Hunter, and yes, I'm the mechanic. Though I should warn you, our facilities are pretty basic." "Basic is fine, as long as it keeps me from becoming a very attractive frozen statue drifting through space." Raven's dark blue eyes sparkled with humor, but Jace caught the underlying tension. "The hyperdrive is making sounds that no hyperdrive should make, and my life support is operating on what I can only describe as wishful thinking." As Jace began his preliminary examination of the Starfire's Grace, he became aware that Raven was watching him work with unusual intensity. Most ship owners either hovered anxiously or disappeared to avoid watching their bank accounts drain. Raven seemed genuinely interested in the technical aspects of the repairs. "Ships," he observed, noting how she anticipated which tools he would need and handed them to him without being asked. "Family business," she replied. 3 generations of Starfalls have been traders, smugglers, and occasionally pirates, depending on market conditions and legal technicalities." Her expression grew more serious. "Though recent events have made the family business considerably more complicated." "How so?" Raven was quiet for a moment, watching him work on a particularly stubborn coupling. My family has always operated in the gray areas between human and Valdari space. We knew people on both sides, traded with anyone who had credits, stayed neutral. In the conflicts, she paused. That neutrality became a liability when certain parties decided that peace was bad for business. Jace looked up from his work, recognizing something in her tone. You were caught in the middle. My ship was impounded by Valdari authorities who claimed I was carrying contraband. While I was proving my innocence, someone with Imperial credentials convinced the humans that I was a spy. Raven's laugh was bitter. Suddenly I found myself wanted by both sides for crimes I didn't commit. And now the conspiracy has been exposed, but the damage is done. My trading licenses have been revoked, my assets frozen, my contacts scattered to the winds. She gestured around the rundown station. I'm down to emergency repairs at forgotten mining stations, and hoping I can stay ahead of the bounty hunters, long enough for the legal system to catch up with reality. As Jace continued working, he found himself stealing glances at Raven. There was something captivating about her resilience, the way she maintained her humor despite circumstances that would have broken most people, and her eyes a deep indigo that seemed to hold depths of intelligence and determination were incredibly expressive. What about you? Raven asked, settling cross-legged on the deck beside where he was working. How does a clearly skilled mechanic end up on a dying mining station in the middle of nowhere? Same reason most people end up in places like this, Jace replied, focusing on his work to avoid those penetrating eyes. Nowhere else to go. That's not an answer. Jace paused, considering how much to reveal. My home colony was destroyed early in the war. I've been moving from station to station ever since, trying to stay invisible. Why invisible? Because the colony was experimenting with human Valdari cooperation. We had mixed families, shared technology, all the things that made us a target. For extremists on both sides, his voice grew quiet. When the attack came, I was off station on a supply run. By the time I got back, there was nothing left but debris. Raven's expression softened. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. Jace returned to his work, but his movements had become more mechanical, less focused. Not so long that it doesn't still hurt, Raven observed gently. They worked in companionable silence for a while, and Jace found himself appreciating not just Raven's technical knowledge, but her intuitive understanding of when to push and when to give him space. It was a quality he'd rarely encountered in his nomadic life. There, he said finally, activating the ship's systems. Life support should be stable now, and the hyperdrive is functioning within normal parameters. Though I'd recommend a full overhaul at your next port of call. About that, Raven said, standing and brushing dust from her clothes. I may have a slight problem with my next port of call, which is non-existent. My usual contacts aren't returning my calls, and most stations won't dock with a ship that's wanted by both governments. She paused. I don't suppose you know of any friendly ports in this sector? Jace considered the question. There are a few independent stations that don't ask too many questions, but they're not exactly safe. Pirates, smugglers, worse. Still better than drifting in space until my supplies run out. Raven met his eyes. Unless you know of a better option. The sensible answer would be to give her directions to the nearest independent port and wish her luck. Jace had learned long ago that getting involved in other people's problems was a fast way to acquire problems of his own. But something about Raven made him want to abandon his usual caution. Actually, he said slowly, there might be another possibility. Before he could explain, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the docking bay in red as Maria's voice crackled over the comm system. All personnel to emergency stations. We have incoming ships, military configuration. Refusing to identify themselves, Jace and Raven exchanged glances. Bounty hunters, she asked, or worse. Jace moved to the observation port, peering out at the ships approaching the station. 3 vessels in Imperial configuration, but without proper identification markings. They look like military, but they're flying dark. Mercenaries, Raven said grimly. Probably hired by whoever's trying to clean up loose ends from the conspiracy. She was already moving toward her ship. I need to get out of here before they. Too late. Jace watched as the approaching ships moved to surround the station. "They've got us locked down. No one's leaving without their permission." Raven's expression hardened. "Then we make our own permission." Over the next hour, as the mercenaries systematically searched the station for Raven, Jace found himself admiring her resourcefulness. She moved through the maintenance tunnels and forgotten corridors with the confidence of someone who had spent her life evading various forms of authority. "How do you know the station layout so well?" he asked as they paused in a sealed section that hadn't been used in years. "I've been her." The converted cargo vessel New Horizon drifted in the neutral zone between Terran and Valdari space, its hull scarred from countless modifications and repairs. What had once been a simple transport now served as a mobile sanctuary for refugees, a diplomatic meeting point, and the unlikely headquarters of a growing alliance between species that had been at war for over a decade. Zara Thorne stood in the ship's main conference room, watching as representatives from dozens of worlds reviewed the evidence that had been painstakingly gathered over the past 6 months. Prince Kale Vex moved among them with quiet authority, his recovery from his supposed death lending weight to his words as he explained the scope of the conspiracy they had uncovered. "The manipulation runs deeper than any of us initially suspected," Kale was saying, gesturing to the holographic displays that filled the room. "Military contractors, weapons manufacturers, resource extraction companies all working together to ensure the war continued indefinitely." At a nearby console, Marcus Reed and Nix Solaro worked in perfect synchronization, their neural link allowing them to process data at unprecedented speeds. The technology they had discovered at the research station had proven invaluable in piecing together the conspiracy's full scope. Transmission logs show coordination between 37 separate organizations, Nix reported, her amber eyes reflecting the glow of the displays, including government officials at the highest levels of both our civilizations. Finn Cross sat beside his father, Ambassador Thomas Cross, who had become one of the leading advocates for the new peace initiative. The attempt on his life had only strengthened his resolve to see justice done. Nearby, Syrah Nightwind maintained her vigil, her assassins' training now employed in protecting those working for peace rather than eliminating them. "The question," Ambassador Cross said quietly, "is what we do with this information now that we have it." Jace Hunter looked up from the engineering station, where he had been monitoring the ship's systems alongside Raven Starfall. The past months had seen them transform from refugees to leaders of a growing fleet of ships, carrying displaced families and former enemies who had found common cause. "We've tried working through official channels," Jace pointed out. "Half the governments we've contacted are compromised, and the other half are too paralyzed by political concerns to take action." "Then perhaps," said a new voice from the conference room's entrance, "it's time to stop asking permission and start taking action." All eyes turned to see Captain Lydia Voss of the Terran Navy, accompanied by Commander Thane Blackwater of the Valdari fleet. Both officers had arrived unannounced, their ships having dropped out of hyperspace just hours earlier. "Captain Voss," Ambassador Cross said carefully, "I wasn't aware that the military had officially sanctioned your presence here." "They haven't," Voss replied bluntly. "Commander Blackwater and I are here representing a coalition of officers from both fleets who are tired of watching their governments ignore the evidence of treason and conspiracy." Blackwater stepped forward, his pale blue features set in grim determination. "Our ships carry data cores containing the complete military records of suspicious activities over the past 5 years, financial transfers, illegal weapons sales, orders that violated established protocols, everything." "Why bring this to us?" Kale asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "Because official channels have been compromised," Voss said. "We've identified at least 12 high-ranking officers in both fleets who were part of the conspiracy. Any attempt to work through normal military justice would result in evidence being destroyed and witnesses disappearing." Zara felt a chill run down her spine. "You're talking about mutiny. We're talking about justice," Blackwater corrected. "And the only way to achieve it is to bypass the corrupted systems entirely." In the silence that followed, the weight of the moment settled over everyone in the room. They had reached a crossroads that would determine not just their own fates, but the future of human-Valdari relations for generations to come. "What exactly are you proposing?" Marcus asked, his engineer's mind already working through the logistics. Voss activated a portable holoprojector, displaying a star map of the local sector. "Simultaneous operations targeting the primary conspirators on both sides. We have the ships, the personnel, and the evidence. What we need is coordination and a unified command structure, and leadership that can't be bought or intimidated." Blackwater added, his gaze moving between Kale and Ambassador Cross. "You're asking us to become revolutionaries," Nix observed. "We're asking you to become the government that our peoples deserve," Voss replied. "At least until legitimate elections can be held and new leadership chosen." The debate that followed was intense and often heated. Some argued for working within existing systems despite their flaws, while others pointed out that those systems had proven incapable of addressing the corruption that had nearly destroyed both civilizations. It was Sarah who finally cut through the arguments with a question that silenced the room. "How many more people have to die while we debate the proper protocols for justice?" She stood at the back of the room, her violet eyes reflecting a pain that went beyond her own experiences. "Every day we delay, more families are torn apart by a war that exists only to enrich those who profit from suffering. Every day we follow proper channels, more evidence is destroyed and more witnesses are silenced." Finn reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that had become natural over the months. They had worked together. "She's right," he said quietly. "We've tried playing by their rules. Maybe it's time to make our own. The risks," Ambassador Cross began, "are worth it." Raven interrupted, rising from her position beside Jace. "I've spent my life in the spaces between governments, watching ordinary people suffer while their leaders played political games. These people," she gestured around the room, "represent something new, something better. A coalition of former enemies united by a common purpose." Jace added, his hand finding Raven's. "If we can't trust each other to do the right thing, who can we trust?" One by one, the couples in the room exchanged glances, silent communications passing between them. Zara felt Cal's presence beside her, steady and reassuring. Marcus and Nick shared their thoughts through their neural link. Finn and Sierra stood together, no longer assassin and target, but partners in every sense of the word. Jace and Raven faced the future with the confidence of people who had already lost everything once and survived. "All right," Kale said finally, his voice carrying the authority of someone born to lead. "If we're going to do this, we do it properly. Full transparency, democratic decision-making, and a commitment to holding elections as soon as the immediate crisis is resolved." And a solemn oath, Ambassador Cross added, "that we will step down the moment our peoples choose new leadership through legitimate means." The planning that followed was meticulous and comprehensive. Captain Voss and Commander Blackwater provided detailed intelligence on the locations and activities of the primary conspirators. Marcus and Nix developed communication protocols that would allow the scattered fleet to coordinate their operations across multiple star systems. Sierra and Finn worked with contacts in both governments to identify trustworthy officials who could help stabilize the transition. Simultaneous strikes in 18 hours, Zara announced as the plans took final shape. 12 targets across 7 systems, with evidence broadcasts timed to reach every major population center. "What about resistance?" Jace asked. "Some of these people won't go quietly. That's what we're counting on," Raven replied grimly. "Their desperation will expose them completely, making it impossible for anyone to deny the evidence." As the meeting broke up and the participants dispersed to their ships, Zara found herself alone with Kale on the observation deck of the New Horizon. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, they could see the small fleet that had assembled. Around them, former enemies now working together toward a common goal. "Second thoughts?" Kale asked, moving to stand beside her. "Hundreds," Zara admitted. "But not about this. About us." He turned to face her, his violet eyes reflecting the starlight. "What about us, a human smuggler and a Valdari prince? Even if this works, even if we create some kind of lasting peace, what kind of future could we possibly have?" Kale was quiet for a moment, considering her words. The same future as Marcus and Nyx, or Finn and Syrah, or Jace and Raven. The future we choose to build together. That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters. He took her hands in his, their skin warm despite the cold of space beyond. The viewport. A year ago, I was third in line to a throne built on hatred and fear. You were a smuggler running from a past you couldn't change. Now look at us. Zara followed his gaze to the bustling activity throughout the ship as humans, and Valdari worked side by side, planning operations that would have been unthinkable months earlier. Now we're revolutionaries plotting to overthrow both our governments, she pointed out. Now we're people who found something worth fighting for, Kale corrected, each other, and the possibility that our children might grow up in a galaxy where love matters more than the shape of someone's ears or the color of their skin. Before Zara could respond, the ship's communication system chimed with an incoming priority me.